I still have to laugh on that day one where I was like, I don't know about these people. They're all talking about these past Egyptian lives and stuff. Like, I don't get any of this. And then the next thing you know, I'm on my knees kissing sarcophaguses, telling people I miss them, crying. And I was like, it was a lot to process. Enjoy this Wild Soul Gathering production. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. Pour yourself a really tall glass of spiritual curiosity and join me for the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast. In the spirit of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. In the studio, I have Steve Kooch. Welcome to Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious.
Hey, thank you, Sandra.
I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us. You know, I've had a lot of conversations on the show on how can we address and support others who are spiritually awakening or have new gifts turning on and they're uncomfortable with them. They have a little fear and uncomfortableness with it. And then what I realized was I wanted to share my personal experience that I had on a trip to Egypt in 2019, where you and I actually met. And on that trip, I traveled by myself, but I had a lot of like, what the hell is happening kind of moments on that trip. So I thought as I've put this out for the listeners, I've actually had my own experiences. And to be honest with you, I've had a lot of listeners reach out. I've had a lot of listeners reach out and ask me just to do a show on the Egypt thing because I've touched on it. But I'll be honest with you, I've really not felt real comfortable talking about it. And I thought, who better to talk about it than Steve? And I don't even know if you realize how profound, what a profound role you played for me on that trip. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Before we get started, though, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about your fascinating spiritual journey, just to get the listeners to know you a little bit, because you've had a pretty interesting ride so far. I know it's not over with, but so far you've had an interesting one.
It has been. Where to start? It's like the way I look at it now is the spiritual journey and life itself is all the same thing. There is no differentiation between the two anymore. At different times when I was younger, I made conscious choices or unconscious choices to follow certain paths, traditions, practice techniques, so forth, do the whole kind of was thought of as the spiritual journey. But just to start at the beginning, from my experience, it's that my awareness or memories or whatever you want to call it, go back to before this lifetime. I remember being in that void or whatever you would call the space astrally and wanting to come back to Earth and coming into Earth to parents who would support that I wanted to continue that journey. I felt like in the past I had not quite completed that journey or gone far enough and I wanted to do more. So my memories go back before birth and the birth process, recalling that too. And then coming into the world and going, what the heck's going on? This isn't what I was thinking I wanted, but it was perfect. It was perfectly what I needed. And the people around me were of their generation and had their languaging. And excuse me, it's a little early in the morning here and we're in the middle of ice and snowstorms. So there's a little bit of that winter voice going on. So the people around me from my grandparents and parents were very, like I say, for their generation and their languaging, they were very spiritually in tune. And so I gained a lot from them and was raised in a church that was very old, mystical, traditional, the Orthodox, Christian Orthodox church, and a lot of mysticism and so forth. So from early on, I got a lot of support and inspiration. But when I hit teenage years and got rebellious, I wanted more and wanted something different. So I started looking around, not very intensely looking, but as soon as I was open to it, things just started falling in my path. Someone saying, "Oh, you want to go to a yoga class? It's supposed to be really good for you." Or, you know, "Hey, have you heard about vegetarianism?" and different things like that. So things started coming my way, and I started taking different paths than was laid out for the typical young boomer age of what was offered. You had corporations, military, entrepreneurship. You had a couple different paths to go, and I was like, I don't want any of those. Going into traditional religion, and when I saw that there were alternatives, I just grabbed them up left and right, and ended up joining an Eastern religion and following that path, and felt like then I'm cutting through a lot quickly here. Eventually grew out of that and declared myself an independent spiritual being, and decided that everyone was my teacher, and everything and everywhere and every moment was it. There was
I love it.
No place to go, and nothing to search and nothing to seek out. It's all right here, and start experiencing it and take it from there. So that's kind of the path in a nutshell to where I am here today.
I like it. I feel like you were like that. You were a little bit before your time spiritually for what's happening in the mainstream now. I love being my own spiritual self because these are all concepts that seem to be making their way into the mainstream. So that's just such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Let's shift to Egypt, and
sure.
This will be interesting. We are also in a snowstorm and ice storm, so it's a little bit later. We're in different time zones, but when you said that, I thought I'm having the same experiences over here. So Egypt, I went to Egypt. I was very pulled to go there. I went on a tour group, a group of people. I didn't know anyone there. So they were unique individuals to me. And I remember it was probably 1 or 2 days into the trip. I texted a friend of mine and I said, I don't know about this group that I'm on this tour with. They all seem to have superpowers. It's really pretty cool, but I don't know exactly how I fit into this. And a lot of people were talking about, they had also been pulled, and it was something that they were looking to experience their whole life, but that they had different connections, and that they felt that they had lived lives in Egypt, and they were sort of coming to reconnect. And, I would listen to everyone as they talk, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting, but I have none of it for me. I just knew I was supposed to go to Egypt, so this trip came up in an email. I joined in it. I didn't feel like I was really fitting with anyone or any of the rhetoric that was going on. And I felt people were, my self-talk is they're more elevated than I, but I'm here for the ride. It was fascinating. I loved it. Then the next thing that happened, there was a series of things that happened. We were in a temple, we were walking around, and I was experiencing it, and I don't remember the names of these temples, so please forgive me. You were at the temple, but there was a set of stone stairs that just went up, and you could look at the top of the steps, and it was gated closed, so you would just walk to the top of the steps. There really wasn't anything there. And I just kept staring at them, and it was like I had to walk up them. And I walked up them, and I don't remember if I had my hands on the stones on the way up. I know I did on the way down. I have actually the most fascinating pictures from it. And you stepped in behind me, and you were walking up the steps behind me. And when we got to the top, I sort of looked out through the fence, and I was like, there was like a courtyard kind of thing there. And I was like, I've been here before, and I've done this. And it became very surreal to me. I turned around, and you passed me up, and you walked behind me. And when I looked down the steps, there was like a series of people that had followed us up the steps. There was like 8 people, and everyone was like on every other step. And when I turned around and I looked down at everyone, it was like everyone turned around and walked down. And I'm like, I've done this before. Like, I've done this a lot of times before. And you apologized, and you said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean any disrespect stepping in behind you. And I don't remember how you languaged it, but the the basic part of it was, I'm supposed to be behind you because I've always protected your back.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, no disrespect taken. But when we got to the bottom of the steps, I was so overwhelmed. I was just so overwhelmed with emotion and these remembrances. And I just wanted to walk up to you because you had sort of walked away and grab you and say, brother, I've missed you so badly. And I'm like, where is this coming? Like, what is happening to me? And
Yeah.
it was like, it was so real and it was so visceral. And I controlled myself and didn't do it, but I did sort of make my way to you and say, hey, I feel like we've been brothers in a past life or something. You know, I don't want you to think I'm crazy or anything like that. And then we had another experience. I think it was before we had this dinner. We were at a different temple, I believe, and there were big pillars. And it was like I was standing there and I could see two kids playing. It was a little girl and a little boy around 7 or 8. And they were running in and out of the pillars of this huge temple playing hide and seek. And I saw you off in the corner of my eye and I was like, oh my God, this was Steve and I when we were children playing hide and seek. Like, this is the weirdest thing. I don't know this man. Like, I want to share it with him, but I'm not really sure, like, how do you have that conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first, like, there's something else going on here that I've never experienced before. It was really cool, but it was really uncomfortable at the same time. But needless to say, things kept ramping up on that trip. And I think they ramped up for a lot of people on that trip because it was a lifetime experience. And the one thing that I'll throw out there is it's a group of people where most of the people did not know each other, but still have stayed interconnected in a personal way after the trip. It's just sort of unique with people that I've met and traveled with. That's a little bit different. So we go into this tomb. And you have to crawl down inside of these tombs, and they would only let small groups in at a time, like maybe 4 or 5 people. So I get down into this tomb, and I am just like really way overwhelmed, different than the steps. And I remember, again, I caught you out of the corner of my eye, and it was like, oh, wow, there's Steve over there. He sort of, you were like you were squatting or sitting on the ground, and there was a stone tomb. And I was pulled to it and I walked up and I just wanted to literally fall to my knees and bow to the tomb. And I was like, again, I was like, oh my God, what is happening to you? Like, what is this all about? And it was like I started feeling teary and I'm sort of doing the eye darting thing, looking around to see if anyone else is noticing me. And the thing that's really strange about it is during that week or 10 days that trip was, I had seen other people do it. But I didn't understand it. And now that it was me, I was really, my self-talk and my self-judging was like coming out all over the place. So I did end up falling to my knees and I put my hand on the top of it. And I remember like kissing where the head would be and saying, Father, I've missed you. It's been so long. I can't wait to reconnect. And I went off in a corner and I literally like just stood in the corner and spent time with myself. And again, I remember watching you. You were across the room in a corner, sort of observing, I think, other people, what they were doing, or having your own moment, for all I know, because everyone was having moments.
Right.
And then there was the whole Sekhmet statue thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's a statue of Sekhmet that's in one of the temples, and they have I'm going to say they have her locked away in the stone building. So we had to have the Egyptian security and police. It was all specially arranged, unlock the gate. And there was a lot of activity that went on with a lot of people on the trip. So again, it was different groups that went in at a time. And as I was waiting my turn to come in, because I was one of the last people that sort of caught up with the group. There was an elderly woman that I connected with that I seemed to be helping around a lot. And when I walked in, I was waiting my turn. Again, I became very overwhelmed with emotion to the point there were tears coming down my face. And I was like, this is just so strange. Like, I'm not really sure what's happening. And then I heard, this will not sound right, but yelling and screaming. So there was yelling out and things being said, and people came out of their visit with the Sekhmet being statue, and like they were crying. There was a lot of emotional stuff going on. So then I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And then it was my turn to go in with my group. And I don't know if you were in my group at that time or not. Honestly, I don't remember. I was standing next to the statue and I
know the
couldn't take my
photo.
eyes off of
I
her.
know the photo
And
of
I
you
was
next to
just
the
overwhelmed.
statue.
Like, I know you, I know you, I know you. Like I've met, like you're my grandmother. And I just kept having this vision of myself as a like 2 or 3-year-old girl sitting on the back steps with this grandmotherly type of person there. But the emotion was just really intense. When we came out of that, it was more towards the end of the trip, but we had a few days. The part that I haven't shared it with most people, but the people who were there knew it. Like, I cried and cried. I literally cried for 4 days. Like, I just couldn't stop crying. And I would like go to these set up little events that were set up on the group. And I would be like, just sobbing. And I'd look at people and I'd be like, I am so sorry. I can't stop this crying. All I'm going to tell you is I'm not sad. I have no sadness. I'm just filled with joy and I can't stop crying. It's the craziest thing that happened. So it was my first experience, and it's certainly one that is exaggerated, that I had. And I'm in my 50s or 60s at that time. I don't remember. And I'm thinking, this is just so unique. Like, who do you talk to about this stuff? Like, what do I do with this stuff? So I phoned a friend, my friend Steve. But do you remember any of that?
Of the whole trip? Oh yeah, I remember all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's go back a little farther. So one of the first days, if not the first day of the trip, we were staying at that hotel that was at the base of the Great Pyramids. And the activity for that day, we got up early in the morning, we went to the Sphinx, which to me was very, very powerful. I instantly started having downloads, past life downloads, um, total like movies playing of who I was and I'd been there before and what happened. I mean, in great detail. And so I'm like, okay, I always wanted to go to Egypt. Since I was a little kid, I was fascinated with the pyramids and mummies and all that.
Mm.
And so when I had the opportunity to go finally, I jumped on it because I was asked to do some presenting on this trip and to lead some meditation or talk or whatever. It was pretty loose. I was just said, come along and do your thing. I always wanted to go, but I had no idea why. And when the first morning at the Sphinx, all the experience that was happening was just blowing my mind. And I've had a lot of what people would call weird, bizarre, cosmic, spiritual experiences in my life. So the everyday cosmic experience doesn't quite do it for me anymore. It's got to be something really big. And that was big, just getting the Sphinx downloads. And then we went from there over to the pyramids, and we were told now we're going to get on the backs of camels and we're going to ride across the pyramid plateau there. And so I'm like, I'm down for this. There's this camel sitting there, and I climb up on top of it. And if you've never been on a camel, when they stand up, you're just sitting there, you climb on top, you're on the saddle. It's all, oh, this is nice. I'm up, 5 feet off the ground. All of a sudden they stand and it's like, whoa, this get elevated up very high to this high perspective. And it caught me off guard. So right away, I'm like feeling a little shaky. And some man starts leading my camel across, towards the pyramids and plodding along. And he's got 2 camels he's leading. And I'm catching out of the corner of my eye, just someone behind me, just moving along. I don't know who it is. I took my camera and reversed it and took a picture to see who's following behind me. Someone in a bunch of Cleveland Browns, gear, yeah. And it turns out, I found out later it was you when we connected later. But so from the beginning, we're plodding, across the desert. The pyramids are on our right, and we're just moving along. And we're moving along, and I thought, there's something interesting about that person behind me, but I don't know what it is. But it's not any random thing that that's the person I'm crossing the desert with right now. Because the earlier morning had been so meaningful. I realized, just keep eyes open because everything's going to be super deep on this trip. There's too much here. So, and the same with all of life. I mean, I approach every day. I go out for my morning walk every morning, and I approach it with those same eyes of that I was using in Egypt. Excuse me. Watch for it. It's all a cosmic experience. Watch for it. Pay attention. See what's going on. But that was one of those moments where it just really hits you like, wow, okay, don't slack off at all. So I'd become aware of you on that camel ride. And then, like you say, when we went to that, might have been the Valley of the Kings, where we're going down in these tombs. We had to take a day trip to go out to this place where King Tut's tomb. It's a lot to say, King Tut's tomb, where that was. And there was that one that we walked down those long stairs, and they had a lot of color, a lot of paint was still on the hieroglyphics, whereas most of the ones you see out in the open are sandstone color. And they explained to us that they all used to be painted these psychedelic colors. Like everything was painted all over, inside and out, and only the ones inside are retaining that color. And the colors were just magnificent. Being an artist, I was just like, man, the use of their color and where they got these pigments from, because all their blues were from ground lapis. These were like really amazing. Like it was like looking at jewels on the wall, painted on the walls. And in that tomb, when that was happening, everyone left. After a while, I'm just sitting there. I just couldn't leave that tomb. Whoever it was, I felt, I know this place. I've been here before. And people are all drifting away and wandering and going back up the stairs. And I'm like, I can't leave. I'm not leaving until the guide says you've got to go. So I just kind of plopped down in the corner and was just taking it all in. And then the older woman who you mentioned that you kind of bonded with, she wanted to climb down into this tomb. It was like
I forgot about that.
It was like a stone sarcophagus, and she's trying to talk the guide into it. He's like, no one can go in there. And you were in there, and I was in there, and this older woman and one guide. And she talked him into it. And he lets her down, and she climbs over and gets into this tomb thing. And I'm feeling both amazed and protective at the same time. I'm like, okay, does she know what she's doing? And what's this guy putting her in there? She's kind of shaky on her feet. And so I'm just watching it all and meditating. And you're in there too. And then he finally helps her out. And we walk out together. And I remember thinking, there's something with this little pod of the three of us going on, because we're hanging in this place and felt that connection. So yeah, I remember that in great detail. Photos help. I like that I have photos from this because they remind me of things. I've got a photo of when we're climbing out of there, and it's that guide, the older woman, and me, and we got smiles from here to here. I mean, we were lit up. Yeah. We were just sparked. Our energy was just like, going, just, risen completely. So, and then I was in the statue. I was in that group with you, and again with photos. There's a photo of you kind of fallen against the statue. I don't know if you recall that photo, and that just kind of sums it all up, because you're just kind of like fallen against it, and just like you're so completely there, you're gone. It's like you and the statue are one, because that statue was so alive, so much energy. When I first came around the corner into that little room and saw it, and my breath just stopped. I just gasped, and it would just then the tears started coming. There was something very, very powerful about that. It moved a lot of people. I remember, like you're saying, people were just coming out from the small groups before us, and they're all in tears and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, what are we going in there for? What's going on? But so I don't remember the order that things happened, but there were multiple connections there. Like you say, that you were walking up those stairs towards that, black walls and the white light at the top. And the stairs were worn. They had been walked for so many centuries or millennium. They had like grooves worn in them. So you had to watch your step kind of because the stones weren't flat. And I remember seeing you walk up and I thought, I need to follow. I don't know why, but to start following. And I started following you up. And I had no idea that other people had the same idea. They were following me. So when we got to the top and turned around and looked, and the whole stairway is full of people. And they all had their arms up on the walls.
Yes. Yes.
And it was like, this was not planned at all. We just all fell into line there. And we're all standing there looking. That was, if I remember right, that was at the Luxor complex.
Okay. I wondered, I thought it was, but I wasn't exactly sure. And honestly, I don't even need to close my eyes. Like, that is so real to me, even to this exact moment. I can feel the stone. I can see those waves that you described in it, the whole thing. It's right there.
Yeah. So the experiences just kept flooding over and over again. The Luxor was one of the most powerful, those tall columns you're talking about that you can run around in. So we're in Luxor on Easter on a full moon, and it's feeling pretty magical. And this whole complex there has the Egyptian temple. There's a mosque, and they say there's remnants of an old Orthodox church, an early Coptic Egyptian Orthodox church. And remember, I had said that I was raised in the Orthodox church. So as soon as they said that, I was like, oh, okay, that's starting to explain things, because I was having images of myself and other kids running around playing hide and seek in that complex. We
Really?
haven't talked about this. Yeah. We haven't so, and it was myself, my brother, other people. One of them obviously is you. At this point, that explains that. And the other was my cousin Tommy, who was like a brother to me. And we all grew up in the Orthodox Church, and in Michigan, we'd run around in the Orthodox Church and play hide and seek in the altar area and all around and up in the choir thing and the bell tower.
Wow.
So we would, my brother and my cousin and I would play hide and seek there, and I'm walking around these pillars going, oh my God, we ran around here as kids. I know this as a kid. We played hide and seek. So then like a few minutes later, literally a few minutes later, as we're walking through these pillars, the guy says, there's back at the back here, there used to be an Orthodox church. I'm like, okay. So, we're always running around Orthodox churches and playing. I go, yeah, I know this place. We used to run and hide, and we used to run, go behind the altar and run through the passageway and run around and come out through the openings, just like at our church in Detroit. We'd run through one door and come out another behind the altar. And I'm like, yeah, I have, that's so clear that this is what we did. And we get back there finally to the Orthodox Church, and there's faint paintings on the wall that have aged over time. But you can see of maybe Jesus or whatever saint they were related with, because the Orthodox Church connect with like one of their saints as their patron saints. But there were paintings that were on the wall. I go, yeah, I know those icons. I know this stuff. And then when we get up closer, and there's the altar, and the wall is a solid brick wall. I'm like, no, we used to run in circles around here and run through there. And this is just blowing it all out. I'm making this up. This is all in my mind. These aren't real memories. I'm just conjuring up a bunch of, overactive imagination and so forth and so on, because this isn't the place. Because we would, run in circles around here and so forth. The guide is going on, and he's saying, and back at, as you can see here, there's like a line and there's different bricks, because this used to be an opening so the priest could walk through back in the old days. And I'm like, what? So there was an opening there. I knew there was a damn opening there. We used to run through it. And he just said, yes, it's all bricked up now, but that's where there was an opening right there. So again, it's like a reminder, always trust that when you know something, you know it, and have confidence in that. When these experiences don't quite match up to the day-to-day rational mind, so what? I mean, have confidence that we have a gut brain. We have just as many neurons and nerve cell in the gut brain as we do in our head brain. There's the solar plexus of nerves here, and it's just not contained in one thing like the brain, but however many billions of neurons are in the brain, we've got that many right here. And so it's no wonder we have sayings like, listen to your gut or follow your gut. Or when things happen, people clench here or feel it there. It's all legit is what I'm trying to say. Whether it's intuitive or logical or earth-based or cosmic, it's all legit stuff. It's really funny that we think that this is all, all these things are solid when even our own scientific understanding is it's mostly empty space that we don't understand. The space between the nucleus of an atom and the first outer shells of electrons is so vast that we're talking about, 99% emptiness that we don't know what's there and can't explain, but we think it's solid. It vibrates so slow that our nervous system can connect with it, and our sensory organs pick things up and our brain processes it, and we think, oh, that is reality. Whereas, a lot of cultures believe the dream world is reality and our waking thing is this temporary transitory thing, and our astral spirit life
Yep, that makes sense to me, actually.
It is just as legit. But I think of spiritual, people talk about spiritual paths and spiritual this and that, and it's become, a buzzword and something to sell products with, but it just means of the spirit. And I think we've got a body, physical, we've got mind, mental energy, and we've got spirit or soul. And so, when we dream, we're not in our body. What are we in? Or when we're meditating, or people take certain chemical substances and they open up and they connect, or so anything that is of this triad of mind, body, and spirit, anything that's of spirit is spiritual. And when you practice things to connect with your spirit, one of my first experiences was as a probably preteen, listening with headphones to some very mellow music, and the Grateful Dead actually, and feeling myself lift out of my body. There was a live recording that did was very mellow and spaced out, and I would get very, very deep and just start floating and realize that I had a consciousness, an awareness that was me, that was not the me that I thought of in my body. It was okay, what is this me then? And all of a sudden my body is not me. It's like, well, that was a big revelation, kind of waking up to that. And I told the guys about it later on when I worked with the dead. And they're like, oh yeah, we used to do music like that on purpose, just to like send people off their body and trip them out. And I go, well, it worked because that's how I learned how to meditate and astral project, and found out about that I wasn't, my awareness wasn't just locked in my body. And so that was experience of spirit, probably even going back farther, of communicating with deceased ancestors and connecting with them through their photos. And my grandmother used to have these little red votive candles with a flickering flame in it, with the pictures of all the deceased ancestors on her little altar. And I would just stare at them and, 5, 6 years old, and do some type of rudimentary meditation where I would tune in and just, it was all dark and the candles flickering, and there's these people who I'd never met, and they would start communicating with me. and they'd tell me things that were age appropriate, like, you're a good boy or whatever. I'm like 5 years old, you know. But I felt like, wow, these are these beings, these who I never met, are giving me support, and that was reinforced by the religion I grew up in, and then of course the Eastern path that I followed, which was Sikhism, and these things were reinforced as, yes, you can communicate with energy and spirits just as much as you can with another human being if you tune in and slow down and stop talking for a minute and listen.
No, so I'm thinking you actually just your remembrance of the other side when you came in, like you were so far ahead of the game because you came with a lot of memory, and then you had people around you who supported that, which I guess, and you had said you had manifested, a specific family in this lifetime, and of course things. Yeah. I had to laugh. I was chuckling inside when you said, well, it wasn't exactly what I thought when I did it. It looks a little different, but, and I thought, yep, that's how this game is played, a little bit different. And when we talk about Egypt, I guess the more, as I was listening to you talk about it, and the more I think about it, and started with, there seems to be a huge connection. My guess is that we all came for a reunion from some other time there. And that's why there's still this strong connection. And part of why that trip was so special. I still have to laugh on that day one where I was like, I don't know about these people. They're all talking about these past Egyptian lives and stuff. Like, I don't get any of this. And then the next thing you know, I'm on my knees kissing sarcophaguses, telling people I miss them, crying. And I was like, it was a lot to process because it's what you said. You have the intuitive, which I've always had good intuition, but I've not listened to my intuition. Like, I knew it was real, but I wanted to rationalize it with the mental. And that's what someone else had asked about doing a show with it, and they're like, I think you're still processing all of it. And I'm like, yeah, perhaps. I don't know. It's hard it was just hard to language and explain it to someone. And then I thought, you know what, if I've experienced this, clearly there's people out there listening who've experienced it, and either are like, this is their norm, or it's norm in their circles, or they're like me, who are like, what the hell is happening here, and where do I fit in all of this, and am I going to ever stop crying?
Well, a lot of families have like the one person who, like the old eccentric aunt or something, who tells a story about her cosmic experience, and that's kind of like, people have kind of like held on to that. There's the intuitive psychic type relative who's the eccentric, and but for the most part, most people don't talk about it. There's a lot of fear, or there's a lot of stigma. People were, afraid of being labeled with some type of mental illness or something. So a book I wrote starts with the premise that starts in the 1930s, where a psychiatric hospital, where a doctor starts realizing that a lot of people are not mentally ill. They're just and this doctor is from India, so he has the background in spirituality, but it's 1930s America, and he starts to realize that a lot of these people would be revered as like special, in tune, saintly people in other cultures, but in America we're locking him up and labeling them as mentally ill. And so that's the premise of where it starts. And so I think there's a lot of that, a lot of hush hush. When I was growing up, there'd be a lot of whispers like, don't talk about this stuff, or you only talk with certain people. Be careful who you tell these things to.
You brought up downloads. So this is sort of one of my, I've listened to people talk about downloads for a long time, and I'm not really sure. I thought I understood them, then I'm like, I'm not really sure I understand them. And when you spoke of it very eloquently and matter of fact. So I think holding space, downloads, those are a lot of terms people hear.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what the term downloads means for you?
Sure. To me, it's like a massive amount of information coming in quickly. Usually, there can be little blips of little bits of information that come in. I guess I think of them more as like getting a text. But
Good example.
full on download is like the whole picture comes. Like I've just downloaded the whole film or whatever. Someone sent me a video and I just download the whole thing. I can watch the whole thing, the whole 10 minutes and get the whole story there. So like the Sphinx, for example, I just had, thoughts, feelings, emotions, images of me as a kid playing on the Sphinx, climbing up on the paws, falling off and breaking my arm, which was interesting because at the same time I had my arm in a sling because I had broke my arm a few months earlier and came on this trip with an arm that was healing up. And the first couple of days I was still wearing a sling just for protection. I wasn't sure how much I would need it. Then I found out I didn't need it and got into a whole other zone. But one of these overlaps here, I'm standing there getting this download of seeing myself fall off and break my arm there. And I saw the whole picture, people coming up and trying to help me and so forth. And you were probably there because I was a kid playing around on this space.
Probably.
So the downloads is like massive amounts of information just coming down real quickly and filling up like a complete picture and understanding, like quickly understanding it all, kind of like, at an AI level of just like, whoop, got it all. Okay, I understand it.
It always amazes me. Do you think that people can unconsciously be receiving downloads or that it's always conscious?
I think a lot of times they can be unconscious for sure, depending on who the person is or what their receptivity is or how much they want that information. I mean, people have downloads all the time about traumatic experiences, and that's kind of not something they consciously wanted to bring up necessarily, PTSD type stuff. But I think also we can have unconscious downloads where we don't even know it was downloaded, we just got it and we move on, and now we have that information. I don't think it has to be super conscious. I think we're taking in information all the time. Things trigger off memories or whatever you would call cosmic memories, these things that are more like imprinted on our more at a spirit level than just like a brain memory of, I remember going to Disneyland when I was a kid or something like that. That's like a brain memory. But there's cosmic memories of like, I've been here before, I've been to Disneyland before. I was here when Walt cut the cord, cut the ribbon and whatever. Don't have any memories of that. Yeah. Something you said earlier. Oh, so yeah, dropping into 1950s Detroit, Michigan was not what I was picturing as, a place to find my spiritual path and to live that life. But, it all fell into place, even to the point of we moved to the suburbs, and that's where I got exposed to yoga in the mid-'70s. And someone was holding yoga classes at a local school, and that timing had to, come together and had to be in that place at that time. But back to connections. So after you and I had a lot of these cosmic connections of experiencing things and thinking, there's something about this group. It's not just a random group. We're not a bunch of tourists, and there's more connection than we can imagine. It turns out it's not even just past life stuff, but just this life. I mean, when you think about this, we were born within, short distance of each other as far as the globe goes. Detroit and Cleveland, right?
Yes.
We were born within weeks of each other. And the Leo of 1957.
Right.
We both went on and had got careers in healthcare.
Yes.
We both had 40 years careers in healthcare. We both retired at the same time and
Ooh,
and
wow.
and and our first trip after retiring, and our first journey that we're going to do as a big, okay, I'm retired, I'm going to do this thing, was go to Egypt. So, and then we're riding along on camels at the base of the pyramids, and I'm like, who's that behind? Who's that following behind me? There's something going on here. So,
Wow, I'm so glad that I reached out and you agreed to do this podcast because I have felt connected to you obviously ever since then,
mhm,
and I think that we've sort of watched each other from afar. But it's nice to share the experience because it was
mhm.
powerful and life changing for me. It was the first time that it happened, and yeah, I'll
Well,
be
that's
curious if what else we have in the future or what else we have in the next lifetime that we're going to plan to do together because clearly we've done a few of these.
yeah, yeah, and I've seen that with different relationships. It's like there's we cross paths again, we go our ways, we come back again, and some relationships are meant to be very joined as partnership, and some are just to get re-inspired, reignited, and put back on the path. And I don't believe that in any way that this body and this experience is the only thing. There's a lot that came before and a lot that will still come. And according to some, it's all happening at the same time. I know that time doesn't exist, and we can go off on that, but
Right.
it's all pretty amazing. And the important thing for me is that these reminders and these cosmic experiences, as much fun as they are, the important thing is that they remind me that it's not just all about me and my limited identity right now. What we call the ego self, the ego, the identity of I'm Steve Kooch, I'm in this body, I've had this life, I've done these things, blah blah blah. Um, that's all fun and good, and it's been a fun time. And the important thing is if I can't take all that, those experiences, and put it into my heart and just be nice to people, just be kind, you know? I mean, all the cosmic experiences in the world and all the kundalini blowing out of the top of your head and communing with the spirit world doesn't mean crap if you're going to be a jerk.
Okay.
you
Good
know,
point.
if you can't, then if it can't come into my heart and I can't be a better person for it, if I can't be kinder to people and be nicer, and, none of it matters. I look at my parents, they had pretty traditional lives. They were first generation Americans. They got the job they worked at within, actually public service government sectors, and put their time in and worked real hard and got their pension and lived good lives. And they didn't meditate. They didn't do yoga. They
Yeah.
didn't, um, travel to sacred sites and have, you know, what we call the spiritual new age experiences. But they served people, and they were heart driven. The proof in it is that when they left the earth, hundreds and hundreds of people showed up, and to honor them and to talk about how they touched their lives and made their lives better. So all these experiences and all this stuff is really, really wonderful. And I encourage people to go explore and break your limits and boundaries. Don't be held by conventional thinking and tradition that tells you things should be a certain way. And take that and let it lift you up to make your life make the dent that you made, that you came here and you touched some people's lives. Whether it's just one person who, you helped have a better experience. Everyone we lift up, every single one of us needs to be lifted up, because we're all connected, right? I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
we can have these connections where we go, damn, we're connected. Oh my God, there's all this stuff that's so obvious. But even the ones who you don't know, or the ones that I might be like initially repulsed by, like, by someone's behavior, attitudes, or
Mhm.
words or deeds that seem really horrible and probably are, because we're still all connected. We have all these threads going out. And until the lowest and the most, base, horrible person gets uplifted too. We're all still tied in together. And so every time we can uplift ourselves or anybody else, it's so important.
I usually tie things up with, is there anything you'd like to leave with the listeners? But I think you just left like a rock star words to live by, right?
Okay.
Your thoughts on that? That was pretty powerful to me.
I think service,
simple and powerful.
I've never really been held back or hurt or had any loss by giving and serving. It might not look totally perfect on the outside, but whenever I've can give and serve and treat people with respect and kindness, it's only helped me and them and everybody. So any words I say is give and serve as much as you can. That's what I want to do, and I want to be present with every breath. The breath brings us present. Talk about yogic practices. The breath is always in the now. The breath is always in the present. So the more I'm conscious of my breath, the more in each breath I'm in that moment, I'm here. And when we're here, it's pretty far out. Because here,
it is
a great place. Right here, right now is wonderful. So, to steal a line from somebody, be here now.
Absolutely.
And give and serve as much as you can, and feel it in the heart, and
it does. It warms the heart. So I am really grateful for this cosmic reconnection of our cosmic connection. This has really been, it's been very special for me, and it's really helped me move this all out of my head and honestly more into my heart space. So it's a beautiful thing. I want to thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me onto this. This is really an honor and a pleasure. And finally, it's nice to connect and have a long chat.
Definitely. This is definitely one of my most special episodes. And to all you listeners out there, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Remember, embrace that wild soul, and we love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wild Soul Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To learn more about our guests, please go to our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We're very eager to hear from our listeners what you thought of the episode, topics you might like us to cover in the future, your thoughts on spirituality, questions you may have. Please feel free to send us an email at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.